Our next panel is the Secession panel. I don't know if they're doing anything like this in any other state. I don't think they have Liberty Forums there. They might. I doubt they are planning their independence as diligently and strategically as we are. So what we have is a panel including some state reps, some activists, and it's going to be good. So without further ado, I'm going to start introducing people. We have, first off, Elliot Alu Axelman. He's one of our most prolific activists. Yeah, give him a hand. Give him a hand. Alu is one of our most prolific activists. He's the founder of Liberty Block. He's an author, a journalist, and a relentless advocate for secession. If you see him out in public, he's probably giving you those Foundation for New Hampshire Independence flyers that have been around for years, like stacks of them, and telling them you give your friends. Do it. Take them. Who's next? After that, we have Stephen Billy. Stephen Billy is the founder of the... Oh, yeah, give him a hand. Give him a hand, everybody. Stephen Billy is the founder of the Club 75 Alliance, which advocates for the peaceful secession of New Hampshire as a way to be free of federal income tax. I'm a fan. Up next, we have representative from Ringe, Jaffrey, and Dublin, Matt Santanastasso. If you don't follow him on Twitter, follow him on Twitter. It's pretty based. Also, helicopter pilot. So if you have any hoppy and ideas, somebody to run them by. After that, we have Matt Sabarin de Chouanier. Matt is, do you head up the New Hampshire Independence PAC? Yes, sir. So, also a fan. And last but not least, we have State Rep Jason Gerhard from Northfield and Franklin. Give him a hand, give him a hand. Moderating the panel, we'll have Queen Quill herself, Carla Garrick. Keep it going for him, everybody.
Hi, guys. It's great to see you here at Liberty Forum 2023. We are getting to the end of the weekend, and I'm so glad we get to talk about this very, very important subject, the subject of independence. Independence is something that really could be so many different things, and we're certainly going to explore it today. But for me, independence is really important because it's a notion of self-ownership, and that's where it starts from, right? If you decide you own yourself, that gives you a philosophy with which to navigate through the world. And when you realize that you are independent, all good things flow from there. And part of it would be trying to have a smaller governing body that is trying to control anything in your life. And so that's what we're going to explore today. I'm going to let these gentlemen each do maybe just a short, 2-3 minutes introduction of yourself, maybe also highlighting what drew you to this notion. So we'll start with Gerhard? Jason?
Sure, all right.
Oh, sorry, you're the only one who didn't have a mic.
Yeah, right. So, my name is Jason Gerhard. I represent Northfield Franklin. On 93, it's about exit 20. Yep, stop by, it's good times. So, my introduction to this was through, I'd say the Free State Project was through the Edney Lane Brown standoff in Plainfield, New Hampshire back in 2007. So, there was a couple, they were 65 years old. They refused to pay the federal income tax until they were shown the law requiring them to do so. Obviously, the IRS never came about doing that. So there was about a 10-month standoff, and I allegedly helped them. So after doing 12 and a half years in federal prison, I got out in January of 2020. And through many avenues, I mean, I don't think this naturally just occurred. I think there's something going on here, the way I got into the State House and so forth. But anyway, I'm in the State House now, so I've been pushing the IRS angle. On Thursday, Matt actually voted for it. Thanks, Matt. But we had a bill to require the IRS to answer 3 questions. It's actually a House resolution. I got 60 votes on it. Out of 400 is not great, but it's not bad. So we're moving forward, and I think that my position on this is just that the federal government has gotten so out of control that when they can't even answer basic questions, it's over. we've lost control and we need to move on. So that's my position. It's just a matter of the people you put in charge, they should be able to answer basic questions, especially as to where does it say I'm supposed to pay this fake tax. So that's my position here.
Thank you. And I'm sorry you had to go to jail for such a long time. The state is violence. Don't ever forget that.
But I have to say, I'm not that person saying I'm a victim or anything. I was able to read all day, every day. No, really though. I've been out for 3 years. I've read one book. It was Ian Underwood's licensing book. It has one sentence on each page. It's just I haven't had the time really. I've been working. I'm a carpenter myself, and now 3-4 days sometimes in the state house, it really eats up your time. But I just want to say, like, everything happens for a reason. So even if you find yourself in kind of a crappy situation, just keep on chugging along, and it all works out in the end. So sorry, I just want to not a victim.
Matt of the Pack, tell us who you are.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Saborn de Chouanier. I live out on the New Hampshire seacoast. I'm a member of the Shell. Started the New Hampshire Independence PAC last April. I came to the New Hampshire with the Free State Project looking for unique leadership opportunities. And after the CAA CR 32 vote last year, the opportunity for the PAC came up. I was like, that's what I came here to do. So I took it. My first call with Alu on the phone, who's president, and he'll be talking later. He's like, why do you want to do this? I said, because something's got to break. And we're going to make something break here. So I'm looking forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify, things have to break, but we want to break them peacefully, and that is something that we have to keep emphasizing because unfortunately the enemies of liberty, like their only solution to things is violence. When you see these arguments on Twitter, and that's like, you can't do this because we're gonna come in and kill you if you do, and it's like, well, do you see? That's why we kind of want to leave. All right, Matt from the State House and helicopters, Matt.
Thank you. Matt Santanastasso, representative out of Rindge, Jaffrey, and Dublin. So I got involved in this project because I was asked to put this secession bill in. And, I'm glad we put it in because the truth is seceding from the Union is the only way out of this rogue federal government. I mean, the government's totally rogue. There's all these ideas, convention of states, electing representatives, Congress. None of that stuff's going to work. This is not only is this the solution, but this is actually how it's going to go down. Eventually, the states will break up. It's going to happen. The legislative effort's probably not going to be the one that does it, but that's how it's going to be done. So this is the answer.
I like it. This is the answer. And Sir Steve to my left, for people who don't know, actually, Steve's one of those wonderful silent volunteers that you don't always know about, but he's kind of the guy who keeps the lights on. He acts as the treasurer for the Free State Project, and, he never gets a shout out. So I think we're going to give him a little round of applause today. All right, let folks know who you are.
Hi, yes, I'm the founder of this Club 75 Alliance. Club 75 refers to people whose income is $75,000 and higher. According to the IRS, that group makes up 29% of taxpayers, but they're paying 90% of all federal income tax. So I'm trying to get those people all over the country to move to New Hampshire and push for secession. Now, the secession I'm pushing for is very different from what the others are pushing for. I'm trying to go the legal route, which means a constitutional amendment. I'm not looking for a secession where we're not allowed to trade with Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine, and so on. I'm not looking for a secession where the U.S. Navy is off the coast of Portsmouth enforcing a blockade because the U.S. hates us. I'm looking for a good relationship with the U.S. similar to the relation that Monaco has with France. And that means a constitutional amendment, and however much of a long shot that is, that's the only secession I'm interested in.
And when you say constitutional amendment, you mean U.S.
Constitutional amendment.
Okay,
yes.
and we'll delve into that a little bit as we go on with the conversation.
I'm also another way that I disagree with probably everyone here is I'm not in any hurry. I'm looking for not just any secession, but a libertarian secession. So right now, the Free State Project has managed to get whatever it is, 6,000, 10,000 people. It's a good start, but New Hampshire is still very much a purple state, which means if we seceded, we'd become a purple country. And what I'm trying to get across is that the tendency towards statism, welfare state, and income redistribution and all that, it's so ingrained in human nature. The only way we can defend against it is by building up a huge concentration of libertarians in one place. So we need to first turn New Hampshire into not purple but solid gold. That will move liberty forward. Yes. So I'm happy to wait and bide my time until the support is just overwhelming for libertarians and secession. And okay, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, and I love it. I'm going to steal solid gold, and I'm going to milk that for all it's worth.
Oh, one other thing. The Club 75 Alliance will be at Freedom Fest in July. I don't know how many of you, if any of you are thinking of going anyway, I can get you a discount.
Nice.
But we're going to have a presence. Matt is going to come with me. Also, if any of you know Scott Scheller and maybe one or two other people, we're going to just make as big a splash as we can. We get a 1-hour speaking slot. And the message of my book is basically get your ass to New Hampshire. That's
And what is the title of your book while we're doing
the
that?
Club 75 Alliance Manifesto. There are copies of it out there. See me afterwards. I'll be happy. I'm giving them away. So.
All right. And last but not least, in the intro class, Alu told me before this that I should make sure not to talk too much. And then he admitted later that was because he wanted to talk a lot. All right, Alu, go.
Hi, Alu Axelman. I'm very proud to be the chairman of the board of the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, which Carla serves on as well, and she has for a while. And Stephen Villiers is the treasurer for the foundation as well, so thank you. I'm the opposite of Stephen. I'm not very patient, and I am a radical, and I'm not that concerned with doing things legally. So I don't really want to do the legal route. But I do want peaceful separation. So I think we all want totally peaceful separation. What drew me to independence, I guess, was the question. I realized time and again, and through writing the books and articles and doing the videos and doing activism and getting involved in projects like the COS and electing good members to Congress, I realized nothing's going to work. Every state is too far gone to be saved. The Union, the DC Empire, DC politicians are way too far gone to be saved. We're never going to improve it. And I wrote my first book, The Blueprint for Liberty, about explaining to any reader how it cannot be saved beyond any doubt. You can't save the Union. What we can do is move to New Hampshire, like we're all saying, move here, help us become more pro-liberty, peacefully separate from DC, and then keep becoming more pro-liberty until we have a totally voluntarist society. So I'm really looking forward to all the questions. And by the end of it, I hope to convince everyone to become a monthly donor, at least $5 a month, for the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, and maybe for the PAC as well. So thank you very much.
Awesome. So just so everyone knows what the lay of the land is, we have a pretty long session. I think it's an hour and 20 minutes, and we'll get the time count on, but we really do want to leave enough space for people to ask questions. So we'll probably do like 40 minutes here and then have a dialogue, because part of this is figuring out, one, what people find persuasive, right? And what the language is to help people understand that while it sounds like an insane and radical idea, there's a lot of reasons why it makes a lot of sense. And before we get into those reasons, I just want to give the two state reps up here a chance to talk a little bit, just explain what CACR 32 was for maybe people who aren't that familiar, sort of how the vote went, and maybe, because I don't really know the answer to this question, why we did that last year, like to get the ball rolling, I guess. Matt?
Sure. So CACR 32 was a bill that we introduced last year. And it was to make a constitutional amendment to the New Hampshire Constitution that would say that New Hampshire is now an independent nation and we peacefully secede from the United States. And the way that would work is the New Hampshire House would have to would vote on this thing, get a super majority. If that passed, it would go to the Senate. They would have to have a super majority, and then it would go on the ballot for the people in New Hampshire to vote on. And when we introduced it, we had a committee hearing in the State and Veterans Affairs Committee that was packed. I don't know how many people we had there, but a lot. And then after that, it went to the floor, and the expectation was that this thing would get tabled because usually when there's something radical like this, they'll just table it so they don't have to talk about it. But the Democrats actually didn't want it on the table because they thought it was political suicide for anyone to support this kind of thing. So they got it to go to a full House vote, which gave us the chance to actually discuss it. And then after that, we had an ITL motion, which means to kill it. 13 members of the House voted against that, and it was, as far as anyone can tell, the first legislative effort to actually secede from the Union since, I don't know, forever in the United States. But the real thing about this was, it was taboo forever. People, independence type legislation, people brought it up, but it was something we were never ever going to introduce because everyone knew if you introduced it, politically we would just be killed. So that was really a big question. And we had an election after the secession vote, and as far as I can tell, secession didn't move the needle one way or the other on anyone's re-elections effort. What's really going on is nobody pays attention to politics and nobody cares, which I'm actually kind of fine with. But I run in a district that has 2 seats, and I run with another Republican, and me and him have nearly identical voting records except secession. We had a vote difference of 10, so that just shows that secession just doesn't move the needle. So this means this is a topic that we can talk about, and it's totally fine.
Great. So, Jason, you weren't elected when you were there. So what's the word on the street in the State House? Like, do people talk about it? Have you heard anything?
The going position is that secession is out and nullification is in. So kind of changed the wardrobe, got back on stage, and now nullification. So the Nullification Caucus has officially been created, which I know it sounds exciting, but realistically it's just you can tell the clerk, hey, I want to put in the calendar, we have this new caucus. Boom, it's done. It doesn't mean anything. But at the same time, for PR reasons, it means something. So officially the Nullification Caucus exists, and I was actually, we'll get to it later on, but I think the biggest secession issue right now would be the Defend the Guard bill. I think that's kind of something, but...
Actually, talk about it now while you have it just a little bit. Give
all right,
people
I'll just make it brief. So
yeah.
Defend the Guard
What
is
does
saying that...
nullification mean?
Yeah,
The
and
caucus. What does
define
nullification
nullification.
So nullification is just minimizing the federal government's influence in the affairs of New Hampshire. But let me get to Defend the Guard, and you guys can talk about nullification for hours. So the Defend the Guard is saying that the New Hampshire National Guard will not be deployed for any war unless it's actually declared a war by Congress. So Montana recently looked at this bill, and it was shot down in their House. I think it was a 60 to 40 vote. But ours is still actually in committee, and the chairman of the State Federal Relations Committee is holding on to it, so we're trying to pressure him to get it up for a vote. But I think that is, to me, that's one of the more important secession things going on right now, because if we can pull our own troops back, that's the biggest middle finger to the feds, I think, and the most effective one, because we're keeping our troops here. Why do we need them fighting wherever? So, yeah.
Okay, great. And okay, go ahead, and then we're going to have all of you just give a quick definition also about nullification and an example from past.
Yeah. So Defend the Guard, defendtheguard.us is the resource for that. And this is a national effort to basically retain our National Guards in the case that we're in a war that's not been declared by Congress. And it's a big deal because the National Guard troops are more effective and cheaper than regular Army. And the government cannot do its imperialism without the National Guard's compliance. So this thing's a really big deal. And during testimony, it was just amazing because the fiscal note for this thing, so without getting the legal argument, some people argue that we would lose funding from the federal government if we did this, which I would argue we wouldn't. But without getting the details of that, the fiscal note actually said on it, if New Hampshire was to comply with the Constitution, we would lose this funding. So it's just like they actually just admitted that, so what? So we have an illegal army, And then one of the government guys that was there was like, he was like, well, we just can't ignore Title 10 of the U.S. Code, but you could just ignore the U.S. Constitution. So it's just, the whole thing's just funny, but it's a good effort, and I'm pretty excited about it.
So where is it currently? It's in committee. And so is there any call to action, anything folks can be doing over the next few months for this?
So it's been retained by the committee, so the committee will vote on it again next year. So you have until next year to try to influence the committee if you want to call the reps or anything like that.
And this is the kind of issue where you could easily be writing letters to the editor. I feel like it's the kind of issue that ordinary granite stater would get behind. There are very few things Congress should be doing, but one of them is actually declaring war. And if they can't even get that right, I remember when Iraq and Afghanistan were starting and they deployed the National Guard for the first time. That wasn't even something that was ever supposed to happen. I'm not sure it's even legal, right? So they do these things and they just encroach. And it just slides until we're in a situation like this. Shifting back to nullification for a second, of course, we know like marijuana laws is a way that you can nullify things. I'm interested in more nullification. And actually, I was really excited for those of you who weren't here on Friday. Ryan Terrell, who's now the vice chair of the New Hampshire GOP, a younger guy, he seems cool, and I personally invited him to come, and he had a really good time. And when he was leaving, he said, what's your reception with the Republicans? And he was like, oh, I saw you had some photos up. And I was like, well, they've always liked me until this secession stuff. And now everyone's like a little arm's length. And he goes, oh, well, I joined the Nullification caucus. So I'm going to try and help you guys a little bit on some of these issues. So you never know where you're going to find those allies. But just for the folks who might not be as familiar.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, by the way, Matt Santonastasso, I believe, and Matt Saborin are both veterans, I think. And also the Derek Pruill, who's the treasurer of the New Hampshire Independence PAC, also one of the biggest Defend the Guard supporters. He's also a veteran of the Army, I believe. So these people, not that you have to clap, but these people actually, served and they were abroad and they know what they're talking about when they talk about National Guard apparently being deployed abroad more than the U.S. military because it's cheaper and less regulations. Now, as far as nullification, it's the basic premise of blocking federal laws from being enforced, essentially applying within a state. People can call Jason and me crazy, that's fine, but right now, like 30 or 40 states, maybe every state, nullifies federal law. As you might know, 30 or 40 states are nullifying federal cannabis law in some form or fashion, starting with California or Washington, Oregon 10, 20, 30 years ago maybe. And now I think the majority of states have some cannabis legalization. According to the federal government, it's still Schedule 1, which is the most strict type of substance, Schedule 1 substance controlled, which is their designation for substances with zero medical benefit, super dangerous, and super addictive, all of which are not really true about cannabis. But the feds don't really have to have logic and reason. So the states nullify cannabis law. States nullify federal immigration law in a sense with the sanctuary states. I think there are maybe a few dozen sanctuary states. And a bunch of states now in the last few years have nullified federal gun laws as well. I think Missouri, Texas, Wyoming, a bunch of states, and now New Hampshire as well, after last year, House Bill 1178 nullifies federal gun laws. So this does happen. It can happen. Yes, the feds probably don't like it. Yes, they threaten to cut funding, and we'll get to that later in the talk, I'm sure, about whether that's a good thing. But states are doing it. 40, 50 states, maybe all the states are nullifying something, and we nullify federal gun laws now, and soon, once we pass cannabis decriminalization, we're going to be nullifying federal cannabis law. So it is done, and the Nullification Caucus that Jason started, it's awesome. It's got like 10 reps already, and they're going to be supporting these kinds of bills. So I'm very excited about the caucus, and they're going to do some awesome stuff.
Hey guys, real quick. So when we talk about nullification, nullifying federal laws, nullification is when a state, it is enforcement of the Constitution. The Constitution has certain delegated powers, and it is only when the federal government assumes powers that were undeclared by the Constitution can a law be nullified. So all of these examples that Alu just mentioned about laws that we're nullifying, these are laws passed at the federal level that are already illegal. So that is how we nullify laws. The federal government has gone beyond the scope of the powers delegated to it in the Constitution. By nullifying and taking the lead on nullification, we are helping to exercise our own state sovereignty.
Wonderful. Does anyone have a sense of what we're looking to nullify? Like what's coming down the pipe for that? Jason?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah, so we did the gun bill a year ago, and Matt Santonastasso, House Bill 581, would have cut ties with the whole drug war, I believe, and essentially Matt can explain the legalistics of it, but I think the state government just says in a small statute, we will obey all the federal Controlled Substance Act. This would have severed that tie, which would give us pretty much drug decriminalization. Can Matt speak to House Bill 581?
Sure. I don't know if it would exactly do that. So, we have a Controlled Drug Act in New Hampshire too. It's like a copy of it. So we can. It's just like a copy of it. So this bill would have just deleted that. So what the implications of that would be? I mean, I guess if the state government wanted to enforce federal law or help the federal government enforce federal law, they could. But as far as New Hampshire would be concerned, these things would just not even be recognized by the law.
So when I think about nullification and what we could do there, I'm really when I think strategically about things, I'm like, what can we do that would make us more popular? Shocking. So because I think that's how you win, right? Like you actually have to, if we want to do peacefully, we got to persuade some people. So I know you said everything, but one thought I've had is what about nullifying more federal energy laws, right? Because we do have a nuclear reactor in New Hampshire. That is a big deal. It gives us about 20% of the eastern seaboard's energy comes from New Hampshire. And, it makes it really expensive to do a new reactor, even though we have a license. So I imagine if we start to look at some of the energy stuff, we might be able to create both economic opportunities because we are free marketeers. It is not true that we don't want to have our garbage collected. We just want to actually pay our neighbor to do it.
Well, just one thing real fast. I didn't realize this. There's a state rep that's very interested in energy. He's on the Science and Technology Committee. But he was talking about the Jones Act. And I never even heard of this thing. But the Jones Act prevents us from from using natural gas that's actually produced in the U.S. The only natural gas we can get.
Any boat, yes.
Okay, we can only get it from Trinidad and Tobago or something like that?
Pretty much, the Jones Act is a federal law that says any importation where the departure and landing is in the United States. So anything being shipped from Florida to New Hampshire or Texas to California has to be on an American-made ship. There are only a few of these left in circulation at all in the world. Yeah. So you can't use a Chinese ship. The ship has to be made here because protectionism and my jobs, the building of the shipyards, but we don't have them because of federal regulations. It costs way too much to build a ship, and it's impossible, and manufacturing is going away. So the Jones Act is the ultimate protectionist crap. Senator Murphy in the Senate, my senator, has a bill. I think he said it passed the committee in the Senate to start studying how bad the Jones Act is.
There's a lot of these weird, nuanced kind of things that nobody knows about that I remember Ron Paul wrote back, I think it was an End the Fed book he wrote, but he was talking about the sugar quota. We can only import so much sugar. There's just so many of these weird federal things that just screw us over that have no bearing or benefit for us. So I think, like what I said, everything, I really do kind of mean that. I mean, if we want to deal with something, let us deal with it. And I don't mean us in Concord, but I mean just us. So, yes, that's all I was going to say on that.
So since funding kind of came up as an issue, I'm going to throw this first to Steve just because I don't know the answer to this. Is New Hampshire, and maybe you don't either, but hopefully you do, is New Hampshire still a net payer to the federal government? Does anyone know?
Not anymore. For a long time, yes. Okay, so for a long time, we were what is called a donor state. We paid more in taxes than we got back in the form of benefits. That was through up until about 2018, and since then we have been a net receiver. And in fact, in 2020, as you might expect, every single state was a net receiver because the government just borrowed like crazy, $3 trillion.
I have a question for Stephen.
Yes.
When we say net donor states, every state claims they're a net donor. I'll take it for a second.
Yeah.
Every state claims they're a net donor, but whatever. And it could be true, actually, because the government just takes all of our money and spends it on crap. But does that include all the money that comes back in here from D.C., both to the state government budget, which they pay around a third or half, and does that include payments from the federal government to individuals via Medicare and Social Security? Okay, so it includes, okay.
Okay, so after 2020, basically, the federal government nationalized all states from a financial perspective, right? Like, I mean, we're going to grapple with what COVID mania was for decades. I mean, it was a lot. but it also sort of created opportunities for us. So because you're a numbers guy, do you want to tell us with your plan? Give us the elevator pitch quick.
Okay. I want to keep this may be unpopular, but I want to keep the New Hampshire's tax structure mostly as is. We would just be freeing ourselves from federal income tax. I guess we want to at least get rid of the interest and dividends tax, but supposedly that's already on the way out anyway.
Yeah, it'll taper out in 2026. New Hampshire will be a true income tax-free state with no interest and dividends tax either. So if you're looking to invest or you want to start to protect your wealth, that is what we should be building here in New Hampshire, right? Like we become a Switzerland, or you say Monaco, which I like even more.
Right.
It's fancier and I can't say it right. So, sorry, I interrupted you. More
So,
of your
all right. So, keeping it basically the same tax structure. Now, I know that many of you want to go further and have complete anarchy. What's called the something state.
And Capistan.
Minarchy. The Night Watchman state. That's right. That's what it is. Anyway, all of those are open for discussion. What I want to allow after we secede is if a town wants to secede from us and try something like full anarchy, yes, let's let them try it. And if it turns out to be viable, then maybe the other towns will try it. But you know, it can be we can become a laboratory of full-on libertarian government. But at the state level, initially, I would think we would keep essentially the same tax structure that we have now.
And Steve, do you have a video or something on YouTube that sort of explains a bit of your vision? I know we talked about it at the author thing, but folks.
Yeah. So if you go to club75alliance.com, right on the homepage will be a video that I put together 2 years ago, basically describing what my vision is. So feel free to watch that, and I'd love to hear your comments.
And it's very much, it's targeted to people who do their taxes. Yeah. It's very numbers, but it is fascinating, and I highly recommend everyone go see it. And then also, when you are having conversations with people, we're creating resources that you can hand to someone and send them to a website and really help to educate people. So we should always be looking for those opportunities, but then also leveraging all the work we've already done. So if there are websites and like Alu's books, use those things because someone else has put in some work. Speaking of putting in some work, Matt from the PAC, tell us a little bit about what the PAC did this election cycle, sort of what the vision is and how people can help you as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Carla. So, we formed last April. We supported all of the candidates who voted for CACR 32, and we found a few more challengers who are running for the first time who also supported independence as well. And the ruling is that if you voted for CACR 32 and you made it to the general election, you were reelected. So that's a good thing. It certainly isn't a deal breaker for that. I'm sure you guys remember the ballot law commission hearing that happened last summer where we had someone whose first name actually was Karen try to get our candidates taken off the ballot. Our PAC was the one that organized the protest that happened. It was on 3 days' notice. We were able to muster a whole crowd of people. The room was packed. I couldn't make it, but everyone who made it there made a difference that day. We won in the courtroom that day. Our candidates were allowed to proceed to the primary, which is great. Now, we did take some hits in the primary. We did lose Mike. We did lose Glenn. We did lose Norm, but that's okay. We'll get him back in a few years as well.
And just to interrupt, I believe that was not because of independence. That was the gun stock issue, so it's a separate issue.
That's correct. It was for politics that were even more local than New Hampshire state politics. So if you
dirtier.
That's correct. Yeah. So we wouldn't be here this year with our Nullification caucus if it wasn't for Mike's efforts with CACR 32 last year. So if you see him, next time you see him, make sure you say thank you for his courage because 29% of the state supports independence right now. 42% of the state supports a vote on independence. So right now we're talking nullification because that's definitely a stepping stone. It's a way to meet the needs of Granite Staters here today. About 2/3 of the state is completely dissatisfied with the way that the state government's going. We nullify, and then secession will come with time. I believe it. Yes, for sure. So yeah.
Okay, great. And just to that point, with that hearing, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, I am going to give a plug to the NBC Boston series that just came out. It's called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of New Hampshire. There are several episodes, and I believe the last 3 will be coming out. They're about 13 minutes long. They're really easy, bingeable. Good. They're probably the fairest mainstream media I've seen before. There isn't an entire thing on secession, and they actually covered that hearing as well. One of the things that was incredibly important that came out of that hearing is a representative from the AG's office testified at that hearing, and he said that insurrection involves violence and that people cannot, so it is on the record that if we are being peaceful and we are purely talking about ideas, they can't come after us for sedition or treason or whatever the big scary nonsense words are that they like to throw around. And for anyone, just for the record, who says anything about, but history says, we are writing new history. We're not going to be held back by bad precedents. We are allowed to go to the people of New Hampshire and say, what do you want? Do you need to be bound by something that happened 250 years ago? No. So we're going to start taking questions, and we'll keep talking. But please, if you do want to join the conversation,
come up to the
start
mic,
to
please,
line
if you have
up
a
at
question.
the mic.
Yeah, just to clarify what they said about the Ballot Law Commission. A few months ago, a anti-freedom, anti-independence, pro-union activist went to the Ballot Law Commission in New Hampshire, which is a state government board, and it has the Secretary of State himself, the Attorney General, or his deputy, is on the commission, and there's 5 board members, I believe. They voted, this person wanted to throw them off the ballot, saying these 13 insurrectionists who voted for independence are so insurrection, traitor, treasonous, they can't even be on the ballot. This board unanimously ruled against that complaint. Unanimous, the Secretary of State himself, Scanlon, his name, he was right there on the board, and the Attorney General, deputy, or assistant was right there. And he's the one who said, absolutely, these people are not guilty of treason, insurrection, or rebellion because they are peaceful. As he knows, we are all very peaceful. We're voluntarists. So that put it to rest, and that precedent set. So next time someone says, don't vote for this, your state rep shouldn't vote for it, it'll be thrown off the ballot, it's rebellion. And that's why, by the way, we got 13 votes. We would have had 50, 80, 100, because around 100 reps told me they support independence. Most of them said they were afraid of rebellion and potential criminal charges for actual treason, which happens.
And you know, Brody DeShays, who is a state representative from Wolfboro, and you'll note there was a past tense use there. He was a state rep from Wolfboro, and he was engaged and brought out to sort of fight this. And he was the one who was bringing this language to the State House, you know, accusing people of treason. And you have to understand these are triggering words that they choose on purpose in order to manipulate the population, which is why, again, it is super important for us to keep emphasizing this is peaceful and we have solutions to problems we didn't create, but that we are damn well gonna fix. First question over here, sir.
I'd like to follow up on what Carla said about energy. Energy independence is going to be key for any seceded New Hampshire, regardless of if it's in Capistan or what we have today without the Fed. The obvious solution for the electrical generation issue is small modular nuclear reactors. We have space down at our existing plant to get started, and we can start sprinkling them around the state. The other issue is transportation fuels, and there is now technology available by which we can turn the massive biomass that we produce, either farm waste, lumber waste, or mining our existing landfills to produce transportation fuels. And my question is there a way that we can start pursuing these that doesn't involve the government, that is market-based, unfree though the current market might be, and how we might be able to kickstart this?
Well, I have an idea. Maybe Ian Freeman wants to put a nuclear reactor in his backyard.
Why the hell not?
I'm kidding, but if anyone wants to donate a nuclear reactor for that experiment, I'm willing to try and find a spot for it.
Well,
Go ahead, Jason.
I'll just say real fast. I was actually talking to a rep about molten salt reactors. I don't know if you're familiar with that technology. That's very interesting. So they're going to be moving forward on that. It's just a matter of there's so much red tape.
Right.
And I don't know what's really feasible politically to eliminate that and just allow technologies to be developed locally so we can figure out what works instead of having to ask permission for 10 years before you try something out. So, I mean, I'm willing to look at stuff, and like Matt and me, we'll put in whatever. I mean, I just don't know what would be the mechanism to get that going. But
And that's why I'm proposing both, because nuclear energy is regulated from up the yin-yang.
Yeah.
But for producing transportation fuels from our existing waste is much less regulated, and is a technology which is already being used around the world.
Well, and I'll just close with this, just something to think about. So when I was looking for money, I'm trying to get a state bank going, like North Dakota's had since 1919. Totally separate topic, but related somewhat. Anyway, when I was talking to the treasurer about where some money is we can tap into to get this going, it turns out there's $1 billion sitting in a fund to clean up Seabrook. And it's not going to be used until 2050, I believe it is. But that's insane. So you have a trust fund sitting with $1 billion just sitting. So point being is there's definitely some possibilities. It's just a matter of figuring out how to connect the dots. So I'll just leave it at that.
Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, I don't have $1 billion on me. No.
No thoughts on. Do you think there's legislation we could introduce? Like, do you know what's happening in other states?
We'll talk after. We'll figure
Yeah,
it out.
I tried introducing the idea in Claremont because we had a whole thing about our transfer station, and it's sitting on a large landfill, and we're in one of the more agricultural parts of the state. So we have the waste, and one of the large waste haulers that services the area actually runs a bioreactor down in Connecticut and is hauling this stuff from Vermont. So it's something which, if we could,
I mean, that's actually interesting. It might be something that one could try on a town level, maybe
Right.
even start at town meetings. I mean, you don't get much more local than that. I've heard a rumor if you really want to cut your school budget, town meeting's a good place to start at about 50% discount.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And while we're getting the next question up here, I don't want to forget that we should talk a little bit about polling and kind of where we think people are. And, so I know the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence did a poll. Can you tell folks about that?
Yeah, real quick, the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, the nonprofit, we had an awesome donor who, through another anonymous donor, angel investor type of person, wanted to do some polling in 8 states, including New Hampshire, about independence. So they donated $50,000 to the foundation. We commissioned Survey USA, a great polling agency that they say is the best, to do this poll. They surveyed people in New Hampshire and 8 other states, Texas, and a few others in the South. And what they found, I have a whole article on Liberty Block, and it's on the foundation's website about the polling. The big results, like Matt mentioned, 29% of people in New Hampshire, the voters, support secession today. 42% support putting it on the ballot, like CACR 32. I think 90% or 95% agreed that the federal government does not have our best interests in mind when they pass legislation. Another great thing is that as far as violence, only 3% of New Hampshire voters would support the federal government using military or violence against the state that secedes. So maybe they don't want us to leave, but if we're going to leave, they don't think we should be shot in the back. So if you don't want your spouse to leave, you may be upset, but if she leaves, most of you, 97%, wouldn't shoot her in the back. Hopefully none of you here would. So there's a big difference between supporting it and killing them, and only 3% would support military. So 97% support. If we're going to secede, let the state go, if it's New Hampshire or some other state. So that was some of the great polling, and you can find out more on libertyblock.com and nhindependence.org. Thank you. And
is it true? What was the number for I believe Republicans on that survey? 53, was that
52%. So all the survey broke it down by a lot of demographics. Survey USA does all the numbers, demographics for every different cohort. And 52% of New Hampshire Republicans support independence today, which is unbelievable. So when you go to your GOP meetings locally, like I do, and the Republicans say, you're crazy. You guys like Matt and Jason and Mike, you guys are insane. The Republicans don't support this. Tell them, according to the one survey done ever, Survey USA, a very legitimate, very good reputation polling agency, 52% New Hampshire Republicans support independence. So that's incredible.
And great. And I think that survey was really valuable. And if you are considering donating to the foundation, that's the kind of stuff we would spend our funds on. I think we should start to try and do an annual one so that we have a baseline and we sort of start to see incrementally. What was the 90% number?
There were a few questions about how people feel about the,
about the
federal
federal
government.
government.
And we have to look at it was 95%, which we knew that would be a no-brainer, but we wanted to confirm. Do people prefer state government? One of the questions was, do you trust the state government more or the federal government more? And again, I think it was 95% or something trusted the state more.
So I would recommend, if this is a subject you're interested in, go look at that poll, because again, that's sort of like a little cheat sheet, right? So when you're talking to people, you can be like, hey, do you trust the federal government more than your local government? It gives you sort of talking points to start to be quite persuasive. And I know that 52% number of the Republicans is what scared them, and it was the reason why they came out so hard against it, because honestly, they did not want CACR 32 to be put to the voters. I think we probably would have lost that vote still, because it's a very high bar. And I might say that as we look towards the future and sort of how we do this, we might want to, look at a constitutional amendment, but start to lower that bar to it needs to be a straight up 50-50 vote. That we just say this is a referendum, we're doing something new. I don't know how that would work, but that might be something to try and narrow over time. But we do know the idea is not half as unpopular as people claim. There were 2 other polls that were done over the years. These were several years ago. It was actually when Brexit happened. So that was 16, I think, right? The union leader did a poll. It was an informal poll, but it was online. And a nonprofit, I think it was the 603 Alliance, did one. And in both of those unscientific online polls, just randomly, but it had, I think, over 3,000 respondents, which was actually more than this official poll. 42% at that time of everyone who voted supported peaceful independence. So, people will tell you, oh, it's a scary idea and this is crazy. But honestly, I think when you talk it through with people, it's not really that foreign. Sir.
My name is Pat Ford. I'm with the Libertarian Party, and I travel across the country, but I'm particularly in Region 8. And first of all, I just want to congratulate all of you in this event. This is astonishing and outstanding at the same time. There are a number of us who are using the Free State Project, and everything that you do is really a model for the rest of the country and how to behave. Most of them won't move to New Hampshire, but at the same time, they're willing to take the lessons and just events like this. If you live in Rhode Island like I do, and I explain to everyone that Rhode Island makes Vermont look like Utah, to stand here with a group of people like this is just amazing. I've got a request and a suggestion. First of all, the request. Amazingly enough, the Defend the Guard bill I've managed to get a sponsor in Rhode Island, which has the potential to be, quite frankly, in Rhode Island concepts, earth-shattering. We are a collective socialist failed working paradise, right? It's so I'm just going to request, we're going to put the word out. If any of you, as we approach the hearing, can maybe make a phone call, send an email, just bring support from wherever we can get it. If we can make headway with something like that in Rhode Island, there's potential everywhere.
Or you can just move here.
Thank you.
Nolan's already tried. A suggestion, incredibly enough, from Rhode Island. Rhode Island passed legislation last year, which is the first in the nation harm reduction center law. So you talk about nullification on multiple levels. The notion, and for people who aren't familiar with the concept, it incorporates a number of issues. Support for folks who are struggling with addiction. Just as importantly, though, it provides safe shoot headquarters areas where people can go and use drugs in a safe environment, have their drugs tested. Now, when you talk about just dumping all over the war on drugs, dumping all over the federal government, there is possibly, outside of Defend the Guard, no more provocative example of legislation in the nation. I would suggest that to every state. And interestingly enough, a few weeks later, I work as a reporter when I'm not doing Liberty, and I had the opportunity to pose this to the cabinet secretary, the president's cabinet secretary in charge of Health and Human Services. And I defined exactly what we had passed into law and defined exactly what we were going to do. And I asked him how he thought about it. And I did that purposely because we were filming. And it was an opportunity at that moment in time for, as a cabinet secretary, to say, well, you just simply can't do that. You simply can't. It defies federal laws, defies schedule, everything. It stands everything against the war on drugs. He didn't do that. Instead, he remarked about the size of Rhode Island, how it was a wonderful place to try different ideas in fighting addiction everywhere. which then I reported as a wholesale endorsement of it. So I just bring that to New Hampshire because states around New England are suffering from the opioid addiction, and it's a great way to nullify laws. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Pat.
Hey, Carla, real quick.
Yeah.
I want to say, so I think we mentioned town meetings just a few moments ago at the end of one of the previous questions. But so when the PAC started, our initial scope was to just help out state reps get into the state house and pass secession and nullification legislation at the state level. We've recently discovered that our PAC is actually able to help out towns and cities at the local level as well. So we're looking to expand our scope of what we can do to help promote not just New Hampshire independence, but also New Hampshire sovereignty as well. That's we had the World Government Summit meet just a few weeks ago. They got their whole website. Some people are trying to take over the world, but we got to watch out for those folks as well. And we're looking to support state reps at the local level as well. Sorry, not state reps, but candidates running for town and local city level as well to help prevent Agenda 21, or sorry, at this point, Agenda 2030 by the UN with international NGOs, help get them out of our states, out of our cities and towns as well. It's no good if we become independent from DC only to become just like
part of the WHO,
a client state to the internationalists in New York City as well. So if you are running, we want to give you resources to help you take your town back. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, and that's a really important point. I think, the landscape is just changing, but I'm sure everyone here has heard that the WHO is, they're talking about giving up national sovereignty of countries to this unelected body of bazoo. What's the insult? There's a B word. Boobs. Boobs is an insult, as well as really nice knockers. But they're just, they're not good people, right? And these things are just kind of happening. So I think that's actually a really good point that we do need to look at that. Howard.
Hey. So I'm Howard Lickman. I write as Etienne de la Boissy Squared. I'm the head of the Art of Liberty Foundation and a big fan of what's going on here with the potential for secession. I know that a lot of people in the Free State Project are voluntarists and don't believe in the legitimacy, the desirability, or the necessity of having a government at all. And so I wanted to, kind of kick around with the crowd and the panel, like what would happen if we seceded as a state because government is illegitimate, because we became the first state that said, hey, we're not going along with it. This doesn't, there's no way to have a legitimate government. What would that do? And also, what do you think that our potential is to serve as a laboratory of liberty for the world? And figure out how do we roll back government, how do we privatize essential services, how do we, create a voluntary society, and like that to me seems to be the opportunity that we have here, is we could change the world here. And so I wanted to open that up to the panel.
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
That's a perfect question. And you just described my first book, The Blueprint for Liberty, where I explain the union's gone, it's totalitarian, it's getting worse every day. We need to go to one state. We need to secede. And then once we secede, the state government is about 5% as tyrannical as the federal government, because most of my issues are federal. And once we secede, we can pop champagne and party for one night, and some other stuff besides champagne. And then we can get to work on dissolving the state government and town governments as well. And then we can have voluntarism. So that's the whole book in a nutshell, but you should still buy it and read it. But that's pretty much it. So yeah, secession. We don't want the state government, because state government is not perfect either, but secession would be a tremendous first step, and then keep going and eventually have total freedom.
With that being said, New Hampshire was one of the first states to actually declare, one of the first provinces to declare its independence from Great Britain, beating the Declaration of Independence by about 6 months. And we do have presidents as in our own independent country. We did have the first president of New Hampshire was Mishak Weir. So the question for independent New Hampshire, when we're a republic, at first, could stay that way too, depending on how everyone feels. But who will be
I thought it was a monarchy.
Who will be the second president of New Hampshire? That is the question.
I have some thoughts on that. Just one term, and I believe in regicide. So that seems like the best voluntarist system you can come up with. I promise to rule with benign neglect. Which is actually how Hong Kong started, in case no one knows that. They had a governor, and his philosophy was very laissez-faire, and they described it as benign neglect. And I was like, I read that, and I was like, yeah, finally, there is a style. Name for my style. Sir.
It wasn't that long ago that the Democratic Party was the anti-war party, and during that period, the largest secession movements in the states were coming from blue states. Vermont, Second Republic, being a good example. Cal Exit. They've lost their way, and I think a lot about where the effective secession movement will come next. And I've maintained for a long time it's going to come from a blue state. As soon as they get back on track, maybe the Ukraine war goes off the rails in a way that they don't support, they might have their come to Jesus moment and kind of come back to that thought process.
I love your hope.
Yeah, I'm hoping. The response of the Republicans during all of that legislative work that was going on was valuable. What I'm looking for, I think, is some way to connect with the folks on the blue side of the aisle. We need those allies. We need them to be 52, 62, 72%. And so, not so much a comment, but a question. I think I'm directing this more to the reps on the panel, but anybody can answer for sure. Is where do you think, two questions? Where was the resistance from that side, if there was any? And secondly, where are there opportunities to bring them along into our process?
Your question's about the resistance from the
left.
blue side?
Yeah.
Yep. To me, it seemed like this first time we introduced it, the resistance was that even the conceiving of this kind of thing was just unacceptable, like to even talk about it. So we really didn't. I don't think anyone really thought about what the implications of secession were or anything like this from their side, because they were just so focused on this just being just unacceptable thought. But now, I think we're beyond that, and the next time it comes up, they're gonna have to. That didn't work. They tried to kick off 13 people from even being on the ballot because this is just so unacceptable. And because it didn't work, they're going to have to maybe have real arguments next time around. At least I hope so.
So, even though I wasn't there, I would say where I see the opportunity right now from the other side, because I sit in Section 3, so they made that intermingled Democrat-Republican. It's kind of good times. So, the opportunity I see is with I guess you call them the progressives or the crazy liberals. They put a bill in to prevent any corporation from owning single-family homes in New Hampshire. So I was the only Republican that voted on that. Now, the reason being is corporations are not people. They're legal fictions. We can get into the history of corporations, but I don't want to bore you. But basic point is corporations were never given the power that they have today. They were kept on a serious short leash. Back in the day, if you built a road, a toll road, after the investors made 10% of their investment back, it became a public road. That's what corporations were all about. So I actually support their position on that in the sense that corporations are the common enemy among all of us. Be it Amazon, Walmart, Home Depot, pick a corporation, somebody hates it. Or even the United States, it's a corporation. So the point is that I think that is the common bond that we can then bridge the gap, and I'm actually working on that right now. But that would be the goal. I mean, from Federal Reserve on down, they're all corporations. And once we get that concentration of power element out of the mix, we can then actually start having real conversations with real people that actually have blood in their veins. So I think that would be the real end goal for me. Reaching across.
Yeah, and to answer Eric's question, I think the simple answer is where do we have common ground with progressives as far as independence is, and that's why, to answer that question, I teamed up with the founder of Cal Exit, Marcus Ruiz Evans, to write the book, The Progressive Solution, targeted towards progressives, why they should support independence and hate DC. And again, it's the big ones that we all know about. It's drugs, it's police brutality and privacy and overall militarization, it's peace versus interventionism all around the world. And my next book hopefully will be about peace and non-interventionism we're fighting all over the world, and now with Zelensky and all over, we want to fight China. Not we, the federal government's going to go to war with China and Russia and Iran all at the same time and probably lose. So if you want peace, police accountability, privacy, substance, freedom, you don't want to have the drug war. All of these things, I think the left at least used to be really good on before they went full authoritarian. But true progressives are definitely allies in those departments, and that's where I think we can have common ground. And I was, pretty optimistic we could pass some of these drug decriminalization bills with the help of the left. I don't know if that quite panned out that way, but we do have some common ground for sure.
And, we hear this term national divorce everywhere now. It trends often on Twitter. It's kind of become a thing du jour. And everyone in this room is a pioneer of some sort, right? Like, we've been talking about things for years, and then it starts to have its moment. I think talking to the left with the notion and the language of divorce is really a way to do it, because that's something we all understand, right? We understand, and we can leverage their own programming, right? We understand what irreconcilable differences are. We understand you're supposed to not, keep staying with your abuser. We understand abusers say things like, if you leave me, I will kill you. And so, when you start to frame it in language and thought ways that they already think. So I actually think that, it's on trend and the messaging is there. Now we just really have to start to take it and really have those conversations. And I think that's going to be road shows across the state. It's books like Alu's, it's concepts like Steve's, and the hard work they're doing as well. It's not insurmountable. We just need to talk to the people that way. And also how you present, right? Like, if people want to be like, oh, that's crazy, but you just have a fun, peaceful, friendly conversation with people, then even if they go away and they're like, that's still a bit of a crazy idea, you're going to be planting those seeds. Brian?
I'm Brian Becker. I have the warehouse out in Ware, New Hampshire. It's about 20 minutes north of here.
Where?
Yes. So I'm I just launched a community center. It's a community-supported non-political center there, and with the hope of making Ware the freest place in New Hampshire. I believe it is already. I believe, my place is actually the most visible place in Ware, which is huge for us.
And it's where it began, right?
And it is where it began. So 1772 was the Pine Tree Riot happened. That was 250 years ago last April. And this April we'll be celebrating that again. So we've had a party to just celebrate that history. So Ware has got the history going for it. We've now got a location there. What do you think about the possibility of a town, starting with a town seceding, or a county?
I mean, look, I'm of the opinion, and everyone weigh in on this, but I'm like, there are no wrong answers. We don't know. Life is a massive experiment. If you have the right answer to life, please let the rest of us know. Otherwise, it's just all about I don't know, let's try this. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. They look at something like what we did with CACR 32 as a failure. I look at it as a massive success. I'm like, what? We introduced the first bill in the history of possibly modern world, and in America, and now people are talking about national divorce. They're talking about what we want to be talking about. Do you guys understand how important that is? We're really moving the needle in ways that are so radical and so historic and so amazing that we may not, because we're in the middle of it, see it the way we possibly, should, but it's real and it's happening. Mickey.
Hi, Mickey Mullen. I coordinated an event nearby.
For anyone who doesn't
Thanks,
know,
Mickey.
let's give Mickey a round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. So the question I have is, what is the difference between D.C. and New Hampshire? And this is kind of to Steve's point. So let's say we succeed. How do we prevent the same thing happening here that is currently happening in D.C. and the country at large? Are we just better than they are?
Yes. Yeah, it's an awesome question. And again, I hate to say it again, but I addressed it in Blueprint for Liberty. I think we all understand here that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the trend is, it's like the opposite of entropy in chemistry or physics. The trend is for centralization of power, and the trend for anyone in power is to want more power, to maintain their power, and to increase their power. That's everyone. I'm the only one in the world brave enough to admit I am the same. If I were elected president or congressman after 20 years, I would be a statist, most likely. That's all of us here. That's what happens. And what we have to do is have safeguards in a good constitution, unlike this crappy one that has no punishments for politicians who don't obey it. It has, it gives them a lot of power. It gives them broad powers, and it lets them decide their own powers via the courts.
And
so,
term limits
yeah.
fixes that. Like,
Term
there's
limits
a
would be great, too,
super
yeah.
easy solution to this problem, but they won't do it.
Yep. So that's one thing we have to keep in mind. Now, as far as Concord versus DC, yes, Concord is so close, and the infrastructure is such that they get paid $100 a year, so they're poorer than I am, Jason and Matt, at least with their full-time job. And so they're regular people. There are 400 of them. We all know how accessible they are, and they all live within an hour of us, and the capital's within an hour of almost every person in the state. I drive 12 minutes. I'm in the capital, and I can yell at them to their face, and they have to face me every day in town. So that's why they're so accountable. He wouldn't dare, even if he were not a good person, if he hated liberty and he were like a statist like Hassan or Bernie Sanders, he wouldn't dare do the things Bernie Sanders does to me because he has to face me every 2 days because he sees me around town. So that's another thing that keeps him accountable. But I agree 100%, like Mickey said, it's a great point. After secession, after we implement everything I've said in my books and speeches, we dismantle the state and or have a constitution that really, and I have a sample constitution in the book, it really limits the government's power to zero, and it confirms that politicians who try to take any power at all should meet their demise in a way that would make them not alive anymore, if you know what I mean.
Peacefully.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add something to that?
I think we need to look at this more fundamentally in the sense of what we actually hope to accomplish. So we could talk about rights all day long, but where do these rights derive from? You know what I mean? The idea is the whole thing is you have to believe in a creator for rights to actually make any sense. Because it doesn't make any sense to say that I have a right. What did some government bureaucrat gave? Like, I'm a state rep. Do you really think I gave you anything? If you do, you're an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a guy that gets $100 a year with crappy Salvation Army suits. So I think we need to kind of step back and look at these people for who they are, these politicians. And just we have to look to a higher element and say, okay, this is what we're here for. We have a set number of years on this, I'm not going to say planet because it's a whole other conversation, but we'll talk about that another time. But, we'll get there. But anyway, so I know we got fans. Yeah, so the point being is I think we need to have that conversation, and especially so Mickey was talking about, oh, no, I'm sorry, Brian was talking about local level stuff, and I really think that's where it needs to happen. At the local town levels, we've got to kind of get together with people in town and say, okay, what do you want? What is the real point? We're all going to be dead here soon. None of us are getting out of this alive. And really have those basic conversations. Instead of getting stuck in these kind of weird constitutional things about some guy in 1773 said something at this tree over. That doesn't really matter at this point. So I just want to get back to that. I think, so, all right, off track, but yeah.
Thank you. And at the town level, really what we're talking about, and you saw it in that NBC thing, is that's how it's supposed to work. Like, one person has an idea, and it's as local as you can bring it. So I'm excited. We're gonna make town hall meetings are gonna be growing in New Hampshire over the next few years. If I had to guess.
I want to piggyback on what Jason just said. There's a awesome motivational speaker out there called Tony Robbins, and one of his mantras that he always does and says is, "You are your standards. We set the standards by which others treat you." So we set the standards. We are the ones who will decide our future. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Emily, did I get it right?
You did, Carla.
Oh my
I was
God!
about to say Emily.
I was like, I'm either gonna land this or.
I was getting nervous. I'm like, does she remember who I am? Oh my God! I met her in the bathroom
well, we
for like 5
bonded
seconds.
because clearly we have the coolest hair on the history of the
Yes.
world,
Yes,
and
thank you
so we
very
were
much.
in the bathroom and we're both like.
And I just cut this in July. I've always had 2 feet long hair, super long hair.
Do you love it?
Yeah, I do. It's kind of cool. Savers. So you said Salvation Army, I say Savers. In Rhode Island, I get a lot of stuff from Savers, right? So I just have a question for y'all. So my name is Emily Ackerman. Most people know me as Dr. Ackerman. Another Rhode Islander. Yeah.
High fives are back, by the way. The
Yes,
science
we do.
says
We do touch each other now, and we don't die from it. and that's okay, right? So my question is, where does I'm not a political person, and I respect the heck out of all of you folks. And you say a lot of words that even me as a physician, I don't even know. Like succeed, what does that even mean? You know, I'm like looking stuff up on my Google search because I'm not familiar. I can't even keep track of what the difference is between a Republican and a Democrat. Okay, so
not much.
Very little at this point.
Well, that's so that's just where I'm coming from. Just so you know, I know I can take your gallbladder out, but I don't know any of this stuff that they know. But the question keeps coming to me as I'm sitting there. I'm so surprised that medicine and medical care hasn't been a topic that was brought up, because like you were starting to say, well, if it weren't for the creator, what I won't even fill in the blank there. But does medicine have a role here? You know, because I'm in Rhode Island, I have my own practice, and I have a lot of ideas about things. Like, where does medical care fit into the agenda?
How about the licensing stuff?
Well, I'll introduce Matt in the sense that he put in a bill for licensing, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so we have occupational licensing, which regulates a lot of stuff and puts red tape up on what we can do. And the thing about licensing, I mean, they say it's for public health and safety, but you know, it's really about protectionism and keeping people in the club. So we put a bill in that someone asked me to put in, like all the bills I put in, and it would just delete the penalties for licensing with the stipulation that you have to actually advertise yourself as unlicensed by the state. So this kind of thing is actually a really great compromise, because not only does it allow people to interact voluntarily with each other, but it even strengthens the state licensing, because it takes all the unlicensed people and gives them the incentive that they have now, which is to conceal their unlicensed status, and actually inverts the incentive so that they would want to actually promote that they're unlicensed. That way they're not actually going to, you know, be in violation of the law. So it's a great compromise, but...
Well, if I was going to add one thing too, I don't want to cut you off, but so recently the OPLC, the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification, they were pushing a bill to license. Okay, so masseuses are already licensed in New Hampshire, which is asinine, but whatever. So they wanted to now license the massage parlors themselves, because they're having issues in Derry, among other places, of a bunch of people of Oriental descent. They actually said that, which is surprising. But anyway, so they got a bunch of Asians giving out handies in these places. So they're upset about it because they got all the local townspeople going there. So they wanted to use the licensing structure to allow them to go in there and bust these people. So you had Homeland Security, you got feds up there talking about this. It was all just a smoke show. And that's the problem, is once you establish this licensing regime, now you can use it, as one of the guys on our committee said, rightfully so. He's like, you want to use essentially like a food safety license issue to go investigate money laundering. And that's the problem. So basically what we're trying to get at is all of the licensing needs to go. If you want to get medical service by Nick, the suspect doctor, go for it. But
so just to make sure I hone in on the point, right? Yeah. I'm 2 years away from no longer accepting insurance. Okay, so I'm a family doctor. So you all probably go to the doctor, right? You have medical conditions. People have diabetes. They have high blood pressure. You need a physical, right? I'm who you go see, and probably all of you have insurance, right? Health insurance. No. No health insurance. I am so in the right place. Woo!
We don't.
All right, I'm going to give the last question
We also
to
don't have
Ian.
car insurance.
We have about 8 minutes. 8 minutes left, so I'm going to give Ian the floor, and then gentlemen, if you guys could each think about like a 1 minute wrap up.
So yeah, I totally agree, Carla, that the CACR 32 was the right move, and we've seen a couple recent examples of this where the NBC Boston, they were being interviewed on WGBH, Boston Public Radio, about how their documentary came about, and they cited CACR 32 like, oh, we heard that New Hampshire was going to secede. We thought there's a story there, and that sparked them. We know Reed Coverdale, who's a nationally known libertarian podcaster. This was his linchpin issue. He heard what was going on with the vote on independence here, and he thought he's got to get back to New Hampshire, so he made the move back. It's not only gotten a conversation started on the state level, but it's definitely put a signal out there to everybody that values the idea of independence, and it says that New Hampshire is the place. Now, we are in competition with Texas. Whether you like it or not, they've been doing it for longer than we have, and they've got a lot more support on the ground, but what they don't have is the access to the state legislature. So we've actually had more success getting a bill heard, having a public hearing. They never even got that far in Texas despite having more support on the ground. So kind of trying to formulate this question, I guess, where do we need to go from here? Perhaps we were the impetus for national divorce going further than it otherwise would have nationally. We're seeing it happen. This Marjorie Taylor Greene character, she seems to be, whether on purpose or not.
I don't know what it is, but it's a good show.
She seems to be muddying the water, though. Her whole idea of national divorce is, well, we'll have red states and blue states and a smaller federal government. So she's not talking about what we're talking about. How do we piggyback on national divorce, raise our profile even further? What are we missing here? We've got new organizations that are popping up. What else can we do? And the questions to any panelist that wants to answer. Where do we go from here?
The one thing I just keep saying is literally talk to your friends. You don't have to talk 24/7 about secession like I do, but I speak to a lot of people. Finally, one person got offended at work, apparently about something they read in my book, which I didn't ask them to read my book. But for the most part, people are pretty receptive to things if you pose it in the right way. But if everyone here talks to one or two friends in the next month about independence, then we'll have 80% of New Hampshire within a few months at least having independence somewhere in their mind. And the second time they hear it, whether being contacted to call their legislators about a vote in a few months, it'll jog the memory, they'll have a positive association, and they'll be way more receptive. So if all of us just talk to our friends about it, online and in person, I think that's the most important thing.
I would say the most important thing is creating parallel structures in the sense of retirement, Social Security. That's the kind of stuff that gets people nervous.
Mm-hmm.
So, and let's be honest, seniors vote. That's just the way it is. So I think if we can figure out the whole Social Security mess, that would be the biggest thing. We got to take care of our own. That's what it comes down to. Amen. So once we figure that out, then people won't be so worried. You're not going to be worried about Uncle Sam providing for you when you know your neighbor's willing to keep you from starving. And I think that's what that local, the hyper-local aspect is what we need to focus on. And I think everything else will just fall in after that. So the concept being is, if you have the support locally, you're not really worried about the federal government giving you anything because you already have it coming from local. So that's what I would say.
That's a great point. And actually, just for people, people who, this question does come up about Social Security. First of all, it is actually bankrupt, right? So let's just be realistic. And two, a lot of Americans do receive Social Security checks in foreign countries. There is no reason why, if New Hampshire was its own independent country and you were on Social Security, you couldn't receive it in New Hampshire like you're receiving it in Mexico. So, we can work that one out. All right, gentlemen, we have 4 minutes left, so the last 4 minutes to you guys. Matt?
Actually, I got to do one thing. Hey guys, so tuning into the hyperlocality. So for this spring, we are looking to sponsor or discover Free Staters and Patriots running for the local city council to help kick Agenda 21, the United Nations, out of our towns and cities, town by town, city by city. We want to take our state back. So please, if you are interested in that, if you're a state rep who's here who also wants to participate in Nullification Caucus, see Representative Gerhard after this as well. Feel free to contribute to the PAC, to donate, contribute to FNHI as well. Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to say one thing and then I'll let you guys go. So the one thing I was going to say is, if you live here, I don't know who lives here and who doesn't. I mean, New Hampshire's a big state. But if you actually do live here and you're planning on running for office, don't be dismayed by losing horribly. That's what happened to me. So I wanted to get the IRS to answer 3 questions. New Hampshire is a great thing where you get 25 registered voters. You can get anything put onto the town warrant article. So warrant articles at your town meeting are like, you want to spend $20,000 on a cop car, something, So, but you can get them to ask questions too. It's like, okay. So I had the IRS questions. And so I'm going door to door in January and February of 2021. But anyway, I lost that election horribly. I got 13 votes. But I ended up winning, obviously I got in now. So even if you do lose, just keep on going. That's my point. So you got to get in the race. You got to run. You got to get involved because go to the State House. A whole bunch of people are over 80. I mean, it's not like these people are in it more for like student council kind of thing or hall monitor. They just want to put that little sash on and walk around. So if you have an idea and you really believe in it, you will win, but you got to get out there and talk to people. The flashy graphics and mailers aren't going to do it. You got to talk to people. New Hampshire's all about just actually talking to people. So that's all I want to say.
And so is volunteerism, so hey.
All right. Well, so I don't know all the answers, but we can all try different things, and moving to New Hampshire and fighting for independence is the best way to get out of the federal government. It's the only answer that I can see is suitable, so that's why I'm doing it. Yeah. So if you do need to move to New Hampshire and you need a ride in, we can pick you up with a helicopter.
All right, that one's for Elon. Steve.
All right. I'll repeat what I said before. Let's bring lots more libertarians here by the hundreds of thousands. Make New Hampshire solid gold. Also, let's frame the message to the rest of the United States as we want the small government or let us have the small government we want. You guys keep the big government you want. Everybody's happy and we can all stay friends. That's my message.
Love it. All right, Alu, you're going to get the last word.
All right, so you're going to hear a lot of things when you go back to your friends and family and neighbors and classmates tomorrow and tell them about independence. You're going to hear, all the things about it's illegal. They tried it once. Again, I hope today and throughout the other things you're going to read, the articles, the websites, the books, you're going to have all the answers to these questions because I do think we've answered them all. But the big ones, as far as it's illegal or they tried that 150 years ago in the Civil War and it didn't work, ask them when your friend is being abused by a spouse and they try to run away and fail, would you counsel them to never try to run away from their abusive spouse ever again? No. You tell them keep trying to run away and eventually you'll get away. So now, going off of that, unilateral divorce, even no-fault divorce, is a thing in the United States and I think in the whole developed world. So it does not take two parties like former Representative Deshaies tried saying. You don't need both parties. Marriage requires two parties. A divorce only requires one. If one wants a divorce, it happens. Otherwise, it's called kidnap or it's a crime. So these are the simple answers to peaceful separation. The natural right to leave is the ultimate of all natural rights that all organisms have to leave. If a lioness doesn't like the lioness can leave. It's a totally natural right to leave, especially an abuser, especially when they violate the contract, the Constitution, which they violated a billion times ad infinitum. So these are some of the answers. I don't have time to say them all now, so cut me off in like another 10 hours. So yeah, come find me afterwards if you have more questions. Email me, find me on social media or anything. And thank you so much for coming. And check out nhindependence.org. Please donate monthly, like $5 a month. It would be amazing. Check out nhipac.org and please donate to all the state rep candidates.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Peace out.
Keep it going for our secession panel, everybody. That was pretty good. So we've got a couple more minutes, and we have our final speech for the whole event. So get yourselves comfortable. I would say if you need to take a leak, go get one. And we've got Jeremy Kaufman up next.